Hey guys, how you doing? Thanks so much for coming back for another video. I am Joey Hernandez. Today I'm going to do a bit of a different kind of video for you. I am going to tell you the 10 most embarrassing things that have happened to me in my life. So without any further ado, let us get right into this. So starting with number 10, for 2 years I pretended I was Jewish. Now, I know this sounds really kind of strange, but the thing is, it was at the request of my employer. I worked for a Jewish funeral home, and I was one of the guys that drove the hearses and picked up the bodies and all of that stuff. And we also did graveside services. And one of the things that has to be done when you are Jewish and you're having a burial is you'll often have a quorum of people, a certain number of people, in order to do this graveside prayer. The funeral home itself was Jewish, but all of those that worked for them were not. So we would often have to pretend to be Jewish. And we learned Hebrew and we learned to say the prayers. And believe me, that was just a very weird circumstance to be in. Moving on, number 9, I almost got beat up by a groom and groomsmen at a wedding. And this is really kind of strange, but when I was in high school, I was part of a band, part of a house band for this very elegant place that had a lot of wedding receptions and senior proms and all of that. And they decided to have an actual wedding in one of the rooms. So it was set up to basically almost look like a church. It was beautiful. And they had me as the organist. And I was up just to the side from where the groom and groomsmen would stand. And then, of course, there'd be the minister and the bride and the bridesmaids. So I was on the groom's side. And the bride was taking quite a while to get ready. So they came to me and whispered in my ear, "You've got to kill some time, play some more songs." Now I had brought with me a number of pieces that I was playing. It was certainly going to be enough for the average wedding, but this one that was taking extra time, I had to kind of come up with some songs to play. And one of the things that came to my mind that was a slow, beautiful, melodic song was this song called My Way that was recorded by Frank Sinatra. And if you're not familiar with the lyrics, the starting lyrics are, "And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain." And as I was playing this, I wasn't singing it, I was just playing it, but it was a very familiar tune. Very slowly, all together, the grooms and the groomsmen turned towards me and gave me this look. And so I stopped mid-song and moved on to something else really quickly. So after this wedding, before the reception, while they were doing photos and all, the groomsmen were talking amongst themselves and saying, "You know, that organist probably tried to screw up the wedding on purpose. We should track him down." So I'm like, oh my God. You know, I was this like 17-year-old high school kid. So I grabbed my stuff and I headed out of there and got away with that. Number 8, I delayed a very important brain operation in an operating room. I was an operating room instrument technician for about a year or so. I worked out of Mass General Hospital. And one of the things that we would do is we would get all the instruments together, all the different clamps and the scalpels and all of that is needed for the different kinds of operations. And we would bring those to the operating room and we'd be on standby. If they needed something, we could just shoot it to them. Well, this was a brain operation, a very elaborate brain operation that was going on. And the doctor requested something that was very unusual, an instrument that is not part of the normal amount that we put together. So I had to run back to the storage room for the instruments, find the instrument, I had to sterilize the instrument, and then I had to get it back to the operating room. And during that time, they literally had to stop working on this person's brain. The patient did survive because I checked, but it was a bit iffy for a while. I was sweating bullets. I didn't want this poor person to have to wait around while I got my job done. Number 7, when I was a funeral director and embalmer, I fell into a grave during a graveside service. Now, I worked as a funeral director and embalmer in a very small town down on Cape Cod. And depending on the number of people that we could get together for a funeral, sometimes we had to do things that were a bit outside of our job description. And one of those things is sometimes we had to assist in hand digging a grave if it was in an area where they couldn't get the backhoe in to do it. And this particular day I was helping them out because they were short-staffed. We dug, we got it all right. We put the boards along the border of it with the fake AstroTurf green stuff on the side so it looks pretty. We were having the graveside service. So at the conclusion of the service, I stepped up onto the wooden platform as the casket was being lowered down, and it was getting a little tangled. So I reached down to undo it, and as I did that, I was on the edge of the board enough that it tipped me inward, and I went flying down into the grave, and I landed face down with my arms wide. Oh my God, I was so embarrassed. I had to crawl and they had to pull me up out of the grave while this poor family was watching me laying on top of their loved one. Number 6, I knew I was gay at age 6. Now, of course, as a 6-year-old, I didn't know what gay was, and I certainly didn't know what homosexuality was. Too big of a word. But I did realize at that age that I started having an attraction towards men. And the big tipping point was my father brought me home from his work one day a framed picture of President Kennedy, President John F. Kennedy, that had been assassinated the year before. And he brought me this memorial picture to have of him. And I said to him, "Oh, Dad, thank you so much. This is great. I really love it. Could you by any chance get me a framed photo of Troy Donahue, who was a big heartthrob in the 60s? And my father just like pulled back and he's like, "What the hell do you want that for?" It passed, nothing was done, but it really like stayed with me like, oh my God, I really do like guys. Isn't that strange? Moving on, number 5. I started going to gay bars when I was 14 years old. Here's the deal. When I was 14, the drinking age at the time was 18. And I always would dress up when I was 14. I was into clothes at that time. I kind of lost that interest as time went along, but I was into getting dressed up, ties and jackets and all of that. And I always looked older. So when it happened to be that I was able to get into a bar the first time, this guy took me in, and they didn't question my age, I got to know the bartenders and the doormen and all of that. And so continually I could go in and they just thought I was 18 because they knew me. They assumed, well, somebody else must have checked his ID because he knows everybody. So starting at age 14 and on through, I was able to go to gay bars, which I don't recommend as a 14-year-old. Because you are very popular when you're 14 years old in a gay bar. Number 4, I once had to physically pull my mother out of her brother's wake. My mother was a lovely woman, but she had a habit of saying the wrong things at the wrong time, usually because she was so nervous or upset. Not to deliberately be mean to anyone, but sometimes things would slip out of her mouth that she really didn't mean to say. Her brother had killed himself. He shot himself in the head. And at his wake, my mother, of course, was terribly upset. And this was the second time in a year that we were all up in New Hampshire together for a funeral, because her brother, who committed suicide, his son died 6 months to the day prior to him killing himself. So my mother's nerves were crazy because she was so upset about going back in again and feeling so bad for the widow of her brother, who also lost her son. So my mother walks in to the wake. We go into the room where the casket's set up and the family's gathered and everything. And my mother walks up to my aunt, and I'll change her name. I'll say her name is June. My mother walks up and she hugs June and she says quite loudly, "Oh, God, June, you needed this like you needed a hole in the head." My uncle had shot himself in the head. So okay, Mom, come on, let's go get some water because you seem upset. And I took her out of the room. And for years afterwards, she was like, "I'm so sorry I said that. I'm so sorry I said that." All the good intentions, but it came out really wrong. Moving on to number 3. I once had a hissy fit when taking horse riding lessons. Now, I know the word for riding horses is equestrian. There is nothing that was equestrian about what I was doing. I was taking basic horse riding lessons, and I was horrible at it. I was trying to learn to post, which is to get up and go along with the rhythm of the horse, so you're not smacking against it constantly, and I just could not learn this no matter how hard I tried. So one day, I just had enough. And I got down off the horse, I ran across the corral, I broke through the gate, I got into my mother's car, my mother was waiting, and started walking towards the car. I slammed the car doors, I locked all the doors, and I'm crying like a little baby. And my mother's like, "Open the door." Click, 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 click. "Open the door. You're embarrassing me. Open the door." And I'm like, "No, no." And, well, I finally did. My mother got in, and as she drove home, she's like, "Just so you know, there's no more horse riding lessons." That was okay with me, actually. I didn't like it very much. Number 2, I peed myself and sniffed tires. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I used to go at night with my father when he would go to places like Sears and the Sears Automotive Store, or other places that my father would have to go in and get supplies to work on the cars or whatever it was. And we went to a Sears Automotive department. So my father was telling me, hurry up, we got to get going, it's getting late." And I had to go to the bathroom badly, and I was trying to go, but my father's like, "Come on, I'm going out the door." So I was trying to rush so fast that I end up peeing a little bit. And I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm all wet, it's going to be noticeable." So I grabbed a huge wad of toilet paper and I stuffed it down the front of my jeans. And so off we went to Sears Automotive, and I guess nobody noticed that I was this little kid with the bulge of like maybe a 13-inch dick in there. And as we were going through Sears Automotive, my father went up to talk to the salesperson. I was near the tires. And it started this, what has been a lifelong thing for me, is that I love the smell of new tires, that rubber smell. And so here I was sniffing the tires with this crotch bulging as I was doing it. Fortunately, it was late enough at night that there was only like one or two other people in the store, and I guess they didn't notice. And number one, the big number one, I helped find a Nazi war criminal. And this is absolutely true. In fact, I have a podcast episode about it that's called The Funeral Surprise. You might want to listen to it. It tells the whole story. But sure enough, I was part of a few people that were able to help the government find a Nazi war criminal. And that was a really big deal. So that's my 10 things, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll do this again with some other things that have been embarrassing in my life. But meanwhile, I'll be back in a few days with another video. Thanks so much for joining me today. Take care. Bye for now.